This video is brought to you by the Book Library channel. For more audiobooks and audio stories, please subscribe to the channel or visit our website www.bookslibrary.p.site. You can request any audiobook and we will publish it for you as a gift on the channel. Thanks.
The Letters of Mark Twain Complete by Mark Twain, Volume 1, Part 2 of Chapter 3. The next letter is an exultant one. There were few enough of this sort. We cannot pretend to keep track of the multiplicity of mines and shares which lure the gold hunters, pecking away at the flinty ledges, usually in the snow. It has been necessary to abbreviate this letter, for much of it has lost all importance with the years, and is merely confusing. Hope is still high in the writer's heart, and confidence in his associates still unshaken. Later he was to lose faith in Raish. Whether with justice or not, we cannot know now. To Orion Clemens, in Carson City. Esmeralda, May 11, 1862. My dear brother, to use a French expression, I have got my blank satisfy at last. 2 years' time will make us capitalists in spite of anything. Therefore we need fret and fume and worry and doubt no more, but just lie still and put up with privations for 6 months. Perhaps 3 months will let us out. Then, if government refuses to pay the rent on your new office, we can do it ourselves. We have got to wait 6 weeks anyhow, for a dividend, maybe longer, but that it will come there is no shadow of a doubt. I have got the thing sifted down to a dead moral certainty. I own 1/8 of the new Monitor Ledge, Clemens Company, and money can't buy a foot of it, because I know it to contain our fortune. The ledge is 6 feet wide, and one needs no glass to see gold and silver in it. Phillips and I own 1/2 of a segregated claim in the Flyaway discovery, and good interests in 2 extensions on it. We put men to work on our part of the discovery yesterday, and last night they brought us some fine specimens. Rock taken from 10 feet below the surface on the other part of the discovery has yielded $150 to the ton in the mill, and we are at work 300 feet from their shaft. May 12, yours by the mail received last night. 1,800 feet in the C.T. Rice's company. Well, I am glad you did not accept of the 200 feet. Tell Rice to give it to some poor man. But hereafter, when anybody holds up a glittering prospect before you, just argue in this wise, viz., that if all spare change be devoted to working the Monitor and Flyaway, 12 months or 24 at furthest will find all our earthly wishes satisfied, so far as money is concerned, and the more feet we have, the more anxiety we must bear. Therefore, why not say blank your prospects? I wait on a sure thing, and a man is less than a man if he can't wait 2 years for a fortune. When you and I came out here, we did not expect 63 or 64 to find us rich men, and if that proposition had been made, we would have accepted it gladly. Now it is made. Well, I am willing, now that Neary's tunnel or anybody else's tunnel shall succeed. Some of them may beat us a few months, but we shall be on hand in the fullness of time, as sure as fate. I would hate to swap chances with any member of the tribe. In fact, I am so lost to all sense and reason as to be capable of refusing to trade Flyaway, with but 200 feet in the company of 4, foot for that splendid Lady Washington, with its lists of capitalist proprietors and its 35,000 feet of priceless ground. I wouldn't mind being in some of those Clear Creek claims, if I lived in Carson and we could spare the money. But I have struck my tent in Esmeralda, and I care for no mines but those which I can superintend myself. I am a citizen here now, and I am satisfied, although Raish and I are strapped, and we haven't 3 days' rations in the house. Raish is looking anxiously for money, and so am I. Send me whatever you can spare conveniently. I want it to work the flyaway with. My fourth of that claim only cost me $50, which isn't paid yet, though, and I suppose I could sell it here in town for 10 times that amount today, but I shall probably hold on to it till the cows come home. I shall work the Monitor and the other claims with my own hands. I prospected of a pound of M yesterday, and Raish reduced it with the blowpipe, and got about 10 or 12 cents in gold and silver, besides the other half of it which we spilt on the floor and didn't get. The specimen came from the croppings, but was a choice one, and showed much free gold to the naked eye. Well, I like the corner upstairs office amazingly provided. It has one fine large front room superbly carpeted for the safe, and a $150 desk or such a matter, one handsome room amidships, less handsomely gotten up, perhaps, for records and consultations, and one good-sized bedroom, and adjoining it a kitchen, neither of which latter can be entered by anybody but yourself, and finally, when one of the ledgers begins to pay, the whole to be kept in parlor order by 2 likely contrabands at big wages, the same to be free of expense to the government. You want the entire second story, no less room than you would have had in Harris and Company's. Make them fix for you before the 1st of July, for maybe you might want to come out strong on the 4th, you know. No, the post office is all right and kept by a gentleman, but W.F. Express isn't. They charge 25 cents to express a letter from here, but I believe they have quit charging twice for letters that arrive prepaid. The flyaway specimen I sent you, taken by myself from Decay's shaft, 300 feet from where we are going to sink, cannot be called choice exactly. Say something above medium, to be on the safe side. But I have seen exceedingly choice chunks from that shaft. My intention at first in sending the antelope specimen was that you might see that it resembles the Monitor, but, come to think, a man can tell absolutely nothing about that without seeing both ledges themselves. I tried to break a handsome chunk from a huge piece of my darling Monitor, which we brought from the croppings yesterday, but it all splintered up, and I send you the scraps. I call that choice. Any blank fool would. Don't ask if it has been assayed, for it hasn't. It don't need it. It is amply able to speak for itself. It is 6 feet wide on top, and traversed through and through with veins whose color proclaims their worth. What the devil does a man want with any more feet when he owns in the flyaway and the invincible bomb-proof Monitor? If I had anything more to say, I have forgotten what it was, unless, perhaps, that I want a sum of money, anywhere from $20 to $150, as soon as possible. Raish sends regards. He or I one will drop a line to the Age occasionally. I suppose you saw my letters in the Enterprise. Your brother, Sam. P.S. I suppose Pamela never will regain her health, but she could improve it by coming to California, provided the trip didn't kill her. You see, Bixby is on the flagship. He always was the best pilot on the Mississippi, and deserves his position. They have done a reckless thing, though, in putting Sam Bowen on the Swan, for if a bombshell happens to come his way, he will infallibly jump overboard. Send me another package of those envelopes, per Bagley's coat pocket. We see how anxious he was for his brother to make a good official showing. If a niggardly government refused to provide decent quarters, no matter. The miners, with gold pouring in, would themselves pay for a suite superbly carpeted, and all kept in order by 2 likely contrabands, that is to say, Negroes. Samuel Clemens in those days believed in expansion and impressive surroundings. His brother, though also mining mad, was rather inclined to be penny-wise in the matter of office luxury, Not a bad idea, as it turned out. Orion, by the way, was acquiring feet on his own account, and in one instance, at least, seems to have won his brother's commendation. The Enterprise letters mentioned we shall presently hear of again. To Orion Clemens in Carson City, Esmeralda, Sunday, May 1862. My dear brother, well, if you haven't struck it rich, that is, if the piece of rock you sent me came from a bona fide ledge, and it looks as if it did. If that is a ledge, and you own 200 feet in it, why, it's a big thing, and I have nothing more to say. If you have actually made something by helping to pay somebody's prospecting expenses, it is a wonder of the first magnitude, and deserves to rank as such. If that rock came from a well-defined ledge, that particular vein must be at least an inch wide, judging from this specimen, which is fully that thick. When I came in the other evening, hungry and tired and ill-natured, and threw down my pick and shovel, Raish gave me your specimen. Said Bagley brought it, and asked me if it was cinnabar. I examined it by waning daylight, and took the specks of fine gold for sulphurets, wrote you I did not think much of it, and posted the letter immediately. But as soon as I looked at it in the broad light of day, I saw my mistake. During the week we have made 3 horns, got a blowpipe, etc., and yesterday, all prepared, we prospected the mountain house. I broke the specimen in 2 and found it full of fine gold inside. Then we washed out 1/4 of it, and got a noble prospect. This we reduced with the blowpipe, and got about 2 cents, herewith enclosed, in pure gold. As the fragment prospected weighed rather less than an ounce, this would give about $500 to the ton. We were eminently well satisfied. Therefore, hold on to the mountain house, for it is a big thing. Touch it lightly as far as money is concerned, though, for it is well to reserve the code of justice in the matter of quartz ledges. That is, consider them all, and their owners, guilty of shenanigan, until they are proved innocent. P.S. Monday, Ratio and I have bought 1/2 of a segregated claim in the original flyaway for $100, 50 down. We haven't a cent in the house. We, too, will work the ledge, and have full control and pay all expenses. If you can spare $100 conveniently, let me have it, or $50 anyhow. Considering that I own 1/4 of this, it is of course more valuable than 1/17 of the mountain house, although not so rich. There is too much of a sameness in the letters of this period to use all of them. There are always new claims and work done, apparently without system or continuance, hoping to uncover sudden boundless affluence. In the next letter, and the one following it, we get a hint of an episode, or rather of 2 incidents which he combined into an episode in Roughing It. The story as told in that book is an account of what might have happened, rather than history. There was never really any money in the blind lead of the Wide West claim, except that which was sunk in it by unfortunate investors. Only extracts from these letters are given. The other portions are irrelevant and of slight value. Extract from a letter to Orion Clemens in Carson City, 1862. 2 or 3 of the old Salina Company entered our hole on the Monitor yesterday morning, before our men got there, and took possession, armed with revolvers. And, according to the blank laws of this forever blank country, nothing but the district court, and there ain't any, can touch the matter, unless it assumes the shape of an infernal humbug, which they call forcible entry and detainer. And in order to bring that about, you must compel the jumpers to use personal violence toward you. We went up and demanded possession, and they refused. Said they were in the hole, armed and meant to die for it if necessary. I got in with them and again demanded possession. They said I might stay in it as long as I pleased and work, but they would do the same. I asked one of our company to take my place in the hole while I went to consult a lawyer. He did so. The lawyer said it was no go. They must offer some force. Our boys will try to be there first in the morning, in which case they may get possession and keep it. Now, you understand the shooting scrape in which Gebhardt was killed the other day. The Clemens Company, all of us, hate to resort to arms in this matter, and it will not be done until it becomes a forced hand. But I think that will be the end of it, nevertheless. The mine relocated in this letter was not the Wide West, but it furnished the proper incident. The only mention of the Wide West is found in a letter written in July. Extract from a letter to Orion Clemens in Carson City, 1862. If I do not forget it, I will send you, per next mail, a pinch of decom, decomposed rock, which I pinched with thumb and finger from Wide West Ledge a while ago. Raish and I have secured 200 out of a 400 foot in it, which perhaps, the ledge I mean, is a spur from the Wide West. Our shaft is about 100 feet from the Wide West shaft. In order to get in, we agreed to sink 30 feet. We have sublet to another man for 50 feet, and we pay for powder and sharpening tools. The Wide West claim was forfeited, but there is no evidence to show that Clemens and his partners were ever, except in fiction, millionaires for 10 days. The background, the local color, and the possibilities are all real enough, but Mark Twain's aim in this, as in most of his other reminiscent writing, was to arrange and adapt his facts to the needs of a good story. The letters of this summer, 1862, most of them bear evidence of waning confidence in mining as a source of fortune. The miner has now little faith in his own judgment, and none at all in that of his brother, who was without practical experience. Letter to Orion Clemens in Carson City. Esmeralda, Thursday. My dear brother, yours of the 17th, per express, just received. Part of it pleased me exceedingly, and part of it didn't. Concerning the letter, for instance, you have promised me that you would leave all mining matters and everything involving an outlay of money in my hands. Sending a man fooling around the country after ledges, for God's sake, when there are hundreds of feet of them under my nose here, begging for owners, free of charge. I don't want any more feet, and I won't touch another foot. So, you see, Orion, as far as any ledges of Perry's are concerned, or any other except what I examined first with my own eyes, I freely yield my right to share ownership with you. The balance of your letter, I say, pleases me exceedingly, especially that about the H&D being worth from $30 to $50 in California. It pleases me because if the ledges prove to be worthless, it will be a pleasant reflection to know that others were beaten worse than ourselves. Raish sold a man 30 feet yesterday at $20 a foot, although I was present at the sale and told the man the ground wasn't worth a blank. He said he had been hankering after a few feet in the H&D for a long time, and he had got them at last, and he couldn't help thinking he had secured a good thing. We went and looked at the ledges, and both of them acknowledged that there was nothing in them but good indications. Yet the owners in the H&D will part with anything else sooner than with feet in these ledges. Well, the work goes slowly, very slowly on, in the tunnel, and we'll strike it some day. But if we strike it rich, I've lost my guess, that's all. I expect that the way it got so high in California was that Rachel's brother over there was offered $750 for 20 feet of it, and he refused. Couldn't go on the hill today. It snowed. It always snows here. I expect. Don't you suppose they have pretty much quit writing at home? When you receive your next quarter year's salary, don't send any of it here until after you have told me you have got it. Remember this, I am afraid of that H&D. They have struck the ledge in the live Yankee tunnel, and I told the president, Mr. Allen, that it wasn't as good as the croppings. He said that was true enough, but they would hang to it until it did prove rich. He is much of a gentleman, that man Allen. And ask Gasslery why the devil he don't send along my commission as deputy sheriff. The fact of my being in California and out of this country wouldn't amount to a blank with me in the performance of my official duties. I have nothing to report at present, except that I shall find out all I want to know about this locality before I leave it. How do the records pay? Your brother, Sam. In one of the foregoing letters, the one dated May 11, there is a reference to the writer's Enterprise letters. Sometimes during idle days in the camp, the miner had followed old literary impulses and written an occasional burlesque sketch, which he had signed Josh, and sent to the Territorial Enterprise at Virginia City. One contribution was sent to a Keokuk paper, the Gate City, and a letter written by Mrs. Jane Clemens at the time would indicate that Mark Twain's mother did not always approve of her son's literary efforts. She hopes that he will do better and sometime write something that his kin will be proud of. The rough, vigorous humor of these had attracted some attention, and Orion, pleased with any measure of success that might come to his brother, had allowed the authorship of them to become known. When, in July, the financial situation became desperate, the Esmeralda miner was moved to turn to literature for relief. But we will let him present the situation himself. To Orion Clemens in Carson City, Esmeralda, July 23, 1862. My dear brother, no, I don't own a foot in the Johnson Ledge. I will tell the story some day in a more intelligible manner than Tom has told it. You needn't take the trouble to deny Tom's version, though. I own 25 feet, 1/16 of the first east extension on it, and Johnson himself has contracted to find the ledge for 100 feet. Contract signed yesterday, but as the ledge will be difficult to find, he is allowed 6 months to find it in. An 18th of the Ophir was a fortune to John D. Winters, and the Ophir can't beat the Johnson any. My debts are greater than I thought for. I bought $25 worth of clothing and sent $25 to Higby in the cement diggings. I owe about $45 or $50 and have got about $45 in my pocket. But how in the blank I am going to live on something over $100 until October or November is singular. The fact is, I must have something to do, and that shortly, too. Now, write to the Sacramento Union folks, or to Marsh, and tell them I'll write as many letters a week as they want, for $10 a week. My board must be paid. Tell them I have corresponded with the New Orleans Crescent, and other papers, and the Enterprise. California is full of people who have interests here, and it's blank seldom they hear from this country. I can't write a specimen letter, now at any rate. I'd rather undertake to write a Greek poem. Tell 'em the mail and express leave 3 times a week, and it costs from 25 to 50 cents to send letters by the blasted express. If they want letters from here, who'll run from morning till night collecting materials cheaper? I'll write a short letter twice a week for the present, for the Age, for $5 per week. Now, it has been a long time since I couldn't make my own living, and it shall be a long time before I loaf another year. If I get the other 25 feet in the Johnson extension, I shan't care a blank. I'll be willing to curse a while and wait. And if I can't move the bowels of those hills this fall, I will come up and clerk for you until I get money enough to go over the mountains for the winter. Your brother, Sam. The territorial enterprise at Virginia City was at this time owned by Joseph T. Goodman, who had bought it on the eve of the great Comstock silver mining boom, and from a struggling, starving sheet had converted it into one of the most important, certainly the most picturesque papers on the coast. The sketches which the Esmeralda miner had written over the name of Josh fitted into it exactly. And when a young man named Barstow in the business office urged Goodman to invite Josh to join their staff, the enterprise owner readily fell in with the idea. Among a lot of mining matters of no special interest, Clemens, July 30th, wrote his brother, "Barstow has offered me the post as local reporter for the enterprise at $25 a week, and I have written him that I will let him know next mail, if possible." In Roughing It, we are told that the miner eagerly accepted the proposition to come to Virginia City, but the letters tell a different story. Mark Twain was never one to abandon any undertaking easily. His unwillingness to surrender in a lost cause would cost him more than one fortune in the years to come. A week following the date of the foregoing, he was still undecided. To Orion Clemens in Carson City, Esmeralda, August 7, 1862. My dear brother, Barstow wrote that if I wanted the place, I could have it. I wrote him that I guessed I would take it, and asked him how long before I must come up there. I have not heard from him since. Now I shall leave at midnight tonight, alone and on foot, for a walk of 60 or 70 miles through a totally uninhabited country, and it is barely possible that mail facilities may prove infernally slow during the few weeks I expect to spend out there. But do you write Barstow that I have left here for a week or so, and in case he should want me he must write me here, or let me know through you. The contractors say they will strike the Fresno next week. After fooling with those assayers a week, they concluded not to buy Mr. Flower at $50, although they would have given 5 times the sum for it 4 months ago. So I have made out a deed for 1/2 of all Johnny's ground, and acknowledged and left in Judge F. K. Bechtel's hands, and if Judge Turner wants it, he must write to Bechtel and pay him his notary fee of $1.50. I would have paid that fee myself, but I want money now, as I leave town tonight. However, if you think it isn't right, you can pay the fee to Judge Turner yourself. Hang to your money now. I may want some when I get back. See that you keep out of debt to anybody. Bully for B. Write him that I would write him myself, but I am to take a walk tonight and haven't time. Tell him to bring his family out with him. He can rely upon what I say, and I say the land has lost its ancient desolate appearance. The rose and the oleander have taken the place of the departed sagebush. A rich black loam, garnished with moss and flowers and the greenest of grass, smiles to heaven from the vanished sand plains. The endless snows have all disappeared, and in their stead, or to repay us for their loss, the mountains rear their billowy heads aloft, crowned with a fadeless and eternal verdure, birds and fountains and trees, tropical bees everywhere. And the poet dreamt of Nevada when he wrote, "And Sharon waves in solemn praise, her silent groves a palm." And today the royal raven listens in a dreamy stupor to the songs of the thrush and the nightingale and the canary, and shudders when the gaudy plumaged birds of the distant south sweep by him to the orange groves of Carson. Tell him he wouldn't recognize the blank country. He should bring his family by all means. I intended to write home, but I haven't done it. Your brother, Sam. In this letter, we realize that he had gone into the wilderness to reflect, to get a perspective on the situation. He was a great walker in those days, and sometimes with Higbee, sometimes alone, made long excursions. One such is recorded in Roughing It, the trip to Mono Lake. We have no means of knowing where his 70-mile tour led him now, but it is clear that he still had not reached a decision on his return. Indeed, we gather that he is inclined to keep up the battle among the barren Esmeralda Hills. Last mining letter, written to Mrs. Moffett in St. Louis. Esmeralda, California, August 15, 1862. My dear sister, I mailed a letter to you and Ma this morning, but since then I have received yours to Orion and me. Therefore, I must answer right away, else I may leave town without doing it at all. What in thunder are pilot's wages to me? Which question I beg humbly to observe is of a general nature and not discharged particularly at you. But it is singular, isn't it, that such a matter should interest Orion, when it is of no earthly consequence to me? I never have once thought of returning home to go on the river again, and I never expect to do any more piloting at any price. My livelihood must be made in this country, and if I have to wait longer than I expected, let it be so. I have no fear of failure. You know I have extravagant hopes, for Orion tells you everything which he ought to keep to himself, but it's his nature to do that sort of thing, and I let him alone. I did think for a while of going home this fall, but when I found that that was and had been the cherished intention and the darling aspiration every year of these old careworn Californians for 12 weary years, I felt a little uncomfortable, but I stole a march on disappointment and said I would not go home this fall. I will spend the winter in San Francisco, if possible. Do not tell anyone that I had any idea of piloting again at present, for it is all a mistake. This country suits me, and it shall suit me, whether or no. Dan Twing and I and Dan's dog cabin together, and will continue to do so for a while, until I leave, for the mansion is 10 by 12 with a domestic roof. Yesterday it rained, the first shower for 5 months. Domestic, it appears to me, is not waterproof. We went outside to keep from getting wet. Dan makes the bed when it is his turn to do it, and when it is my turn, I don't, you know. The dog is not a good hunter, and he isn't worth shucks to watch, but he scratches up the dirt floor of the cabin, and catches flies, and makes himself generally useful in the way of washing dishes. Dan gets up first in the morning and makes a fire, and I get up last and sit by it while he cooks breakfast. We have a cold lunch at noon, and I cook supper, very much against my will. However, one must have one good meal a day, and if I were to live on Dan's abominable cookery, I should lose my appetite, you know. Dan attended Dr. Chorpening's funeral yesterday, and it felt as though he ought to wear a white shirt, and we had a jolly good time finding such an article. We turned over all our traps, and he found one at last, but I shall always think it was suffering from yellow fever. He also found an old black coat, greasy and wrinkled to that degree that it appeared to have been quilted at some time or other. In this gorgeous costume he attended the funeral, and when he returned, his own dog drove him away from the cabin, not recognizing him. This is true. You would not like to live in a country where flour was $40 a barrel? Very well, then, I suppose you would not like to live here, where flour was $100 a barrel when I first came here, and shortly afterwards it couldn't be had at any price, and for 1 month the people lived on barley, beans, and beef, and nothing beside. Oh, no, we didn't luxuriate then. Perhaps not, but we said wise and severe things about the vanity and wickedness of high living. We preached our doctrine and practiced it, which course I respectfully recommend to the clergymen of St. Louis. Where's Beak Jolly, a pilot, and Bixby? Your brother, Sam. Volume 1, Chapter 4, Letters 1863 to 64. Mark Twain, Comstock Journalism, Artemus Ward. There is a long hiatus in the correspondence here. For a space of many months, there is but one letter to continue the story. Others were written, of course, but for some reason they have not survived. It was about the end of August 1862 when the miner finally abandoned the struggle and with his pack on his shoulders walked the 31 miles over the mountains to Virginia City, arriving dusty, lame, and travel-stained to claim at last his rightful inheritance. At the Enterprise office he was welcomed and in a brief time entered into his own. Goodman, the proprietor, himself a man of great ability, had surrounded himself with a group of gay-hearted fellows whose fresh, wild way of writing delighted the Comstock pioneers far more than any sober presentation of mere news. Samuel Clemens fitted exactly into this group. By the end of the year he had become a leader of it. When he asked to be allowed to report the coming Carson legislature, Goodman consented, realizing that while Clemens knew nothing of parliamentary procedure, he would at least make the letters picturesque. It was in the midst of this work that he adopted the name which he was to make famous throughout the world. The story of its adoption has been fully told elsewhere and need not be repeated here. See Mark Twain, a Biography, by the same author, Chapter 40. Mark Twain was first signed to a Carson letter February 2, 1863, and from that time was attached to all of Samuel Clemens' work. The letters had already been widely copied, and the name now which gave them personality quickly obtained vogue. It was attached to himself as well as to the letters. Heretofore he had been called Sam or Clemens. Now he became almost universally Mark Twain and Mark. This early period of Mark Twain's journalism is full of delicious history, but we are permitted here to retell only such of it as will supply connection to the infrequent letters. He wrote home briefly in February, but the letter contained nothing worth preserving. Then, 2 months later, he gives us at least a hint of his employment. To Mrs. Jane Clemens and Mrs. Moffett, in St. Louis, Virginia, April 11, 1863. My dear mother and sister, it is very late at night, and I am writing in my room, which is not quite as large or as nice as the one I had at home. My board, washing and lodging, cost me $75 a month. I have just received your letter, Ma, from Carson, the one in which you doubt my veracity about the statements I made in a letter to you. That's right. I don't recollect what the statements were, but I suppose they were mining statistics. I have just finished writing up my report for the morning paper, and given the unreliable a column of advice about how to conduct himself in church. And now I will tell you a few more lies while my hand is in. For instance, some of the boys made me a present of 50 feet in the East India G and S.M. Company 10 days ago. I was offered $95 a foot for it yesterday in gold. I refused it, not because I think the claim is worth a cent, for I don't, but because I had a curiosity to see how high it would go before people find out how worthless it is. Besides, what if one mining claim does fool me? I've got plenty more. I am not in a particular hurry to get rich. I suppose I couldn't well help getting rich here sometime or other, whether I wanted to or not. You folks do not believe in Nevada, and I am glad you don't. Just keep on thinking so. I was at the Gould and Curry mine the other day, and they had 2 or 3 tons of choice rock piled up, which was valued at $20,000 a ton. I gathered up a hatful of chunks on account of their beauty as specimens. They don't let everybody supply themselves so liberally. I send Mr. Moffett a little specimen of it for his cabinet. If you don't know what the white stuff on it is, I must inform you that it is purer silver than the minted coin. There is about as much gold in it as there is silver, but it is not visible. I will explain to you some day how to detect it. Pamela, you wouldn't do for a local reporter, because you don't appreciate the interest that attaches to names. An item is of no use unless it speaks of some person, and not then unless that person's name is distinctly mentioned. The most interesting letter one can write to an absent friend is one that treats of persons he has been acquainted with rather than the public events of the day. Now, you speak of a young lady who wrote to Holly Benson that she had seen me, and you didn't mention her name. It was just a mere chance that I ever guessed who she was, but I did, finally, though I don't remember her name now. I was introduced to her in San Francisco by Hon. A.B. Paul, and saw her afterwards in Gold Hill. They were a very pleasant lot of girls, she and her sisters. P.S. I have just heard 5 pistol shots down the street. As such things are in my line, I will go and see about it. P.S. No. 2, 5 a.m. The pistol did its work well. One man, a Jackson County Missourian, shot 2 of my friends, police officers, through the heart. Both died within 3 minutes. Murderer's name is John Campbell. The unreliable of this letter was a rival reporter on whom Mark Twain had conferred this name during the legislative session. His real name was Rice, and he had undertaken to criticize Clemens' reports. The brisk reply that Rice's letters concealed with a show of parliamentary knowledge a festering mass of misstatements, the author of whom should be properly termed the unreliable, fixed that name upon him for life. This burlesque warfare delighted the frontier, and it did not interfere with friendship. Clemens and Rice were constant associates, though continually firing squibs at each other in their respective papers, a form of personal journalism much in vogue on the Comstock. In the next letter, we find these 2 journalistic blades enjoying themselves together in the coast metropolis. This letter is labeled No. 2, meaning probably the second from San Francisco, but No. 1 has disappeared, and even No. 2 is incomplete. To Mrs. Jane Clemens and Mrs. Moffett, in St. Louis. No. 2, $20 enclosed. Lick House, San Francisco, June 1, '63. My dear mother and sister, the unreliable and myself are still here, and still enjoying ourselves. I suppose I know at least 1,000 people here, a great many of them citizens of San Francisco, but the majority belonging in Washoe. And when I go down Montgomery Street shaking hands with Tom, Dick, and Harry, it is just like being in Main Street in Hannibal and meeting the old familiar faces. I do hate to go back to Washoe. We fag ourselves completely out every day and go to sleep without rocking every night. We dine out and we lunch out, and we eat, drink, and are happy, as it were. After breakfast, I don't often see the hotel again until midnight or after. I'm going to the Dickens mighty fast. I know a regular village of families here in the house, but I never have time to call on them. Thunder, we'll know a little more about this town before we leave than some of the people who live in it. We take trips across the bay to Oakland and down to San Leandro and Alameda and those places, and we'll go out to the Willows and Hayes Park and Fort Point and up to Benicia. And yesterday we were invited out on a yachting excursion and had a sail in the fastest yacht on the Pacific coast. Rice says, "Oh, no, we are not having any fun, Mark. Oh, no, I reckon not. It's somebody else. It's probably the gentleman in the wagon." Popular slang phrase. When I invite Rice to the Lick House to dinner, the proprietors send us champagne and claret, and then we do put on the most disgusting airs. Rice says our caliber is too light. We can't stand it to be noticed. I rode down with a gentleman to the Ocean House the other day to see the seahorses, and also to listen to the roar of the surf and watch the ships drifting about here and there and far away at sea. When I stood on the beach and let the surf wet my feet, I recollected doing the same thing on the shores of the Atlantic, and then I had a proper appreciation of the vastness of this country, for I had traveled from ocean to ocean across it. Remainder missing. Not far from Virginia City there are some warm springs that constantly send up jets of steam through fissures in the mountainside. The place was a health resort, and Clemens, always subject to bronchial colds, now and again retired there for a cure. A letter written in the late summer, a gay, youthful document, belongs to one of these periods of convalescence. To Mrs. Jane Clemens and Mrs. Moffett in St. Louis. Number 12, $20 enclosed. Steamboat Springs, August 19, '63. My dear mother and sister, Ma, you have given my vanity a deadly thrust. Behold, I am prone to boast of having the widest reputation as a local editor of any man on the Pacific coast. And you gravely come forward and tell me if I work hard and attend closely to my business, I may aspire to a place on a big San Francisco daily some day. There's a comment on human vanity for you. Why, blast it, I was under the impression that I could get such a situation as that at any time I asked for it. But I don't want it. No paper in the United States can afford to pay me what my place on the Enterprise is worth. If I were not naturally a lazy, idle, good-for-nothing vagabond, I could make it pay me $20,000 a year. But I don't suppose I shall ever be any account. I lead an easy life, though, and I don't care a cent whether school keeps or not. Everybody knows me, and I fare like a prince wherever I go, be it on this side of the mountains or the other. And I am proud to say I am the most conceited ass in the territory. You think that picture looks old? Well, I can't help it. In reality, I am not as old as I was when I was 18. I took a desperate cold more than a week ago, and I seduced Wilson, a Missouri boy, a reporter of the Daily Union, from his labors, and we went over to Lake Bigler. But I failed to cure my cold. I found the lake house crowded with the wealth and fashion of Virginia, and I could not resist the temptation to take a hand in all the fun going. Those Virginians, men and women both, are a stirring set, and I found if I went with them on all their external excursions, I should bring the consumption home with me. So I left, day before yesterday, and came back into the territory again. A lot of them had purchased a site for a town on the lake shore, and they gave me a lot. When you come out, I'll build you a house on it. The lake seems more supernaturally beautiful now than ever. It is the masterpiece of the creation. The hotel here at the Springs is not so much crowded as usual, and I'm having a very comfortable time of it. The hot, white steam puffs up out of fissures in the earth like the jets that come from a steamboat's escape pipes, and it makes a boiling, surging noise like a steamboat, too, hence the name. We put eggs in a handkerchief and dip them in the springs. They soft boil in 2 minutes, and boil as hard as a rock in 4 minutes. These fissures extend more than a quarter of a mile, and the long line of steam columns looks very pretty. A large bathhouse is built over one of the springs, and we go in it and steam ourselves as long as we can stand it, and then come out and take a cold shower bath. You get baths, board, and lodging all for $25 a week, cheaper than living in Virginia without baths. Yours affectionately, Mark. It was now the autumn of 1863. Mark Twain was 28 years old. On the coast, he had established a reputation as a gaily original newspaper writer. Thus far, however, he had absolutely no literary standing, nor is there any evidence that he had literary ambitions. His work was unformed, uncultivated, all of which seems strange now when we realize that somewhere behind lay the substance of immortality. Rudyard Kipling, at 28, had done his greatest work. Even Joseph Goodman, who had a fine literary perception and a deep knowledge of men, intimately associated with Mark Twain as he was, received at this time no hint of his greater powers. Another man on the staff of the Enterprise, William Wright, who called himself Dan de Quille, a graceful humorist, gave far more promise, Goodman thought, of future distinction. It was Artemus Ward who first suspected the value of Mark Twain's gifts and urged him to some more important use of them. Artemus, in the course of a transcontinental lecture tour, stopped in Virginia City and naturally found congenial society on the Enterprise staff. He had intended remaining but a few days, but lingered 3 weeks, a period of continuous celebration closing only with the holiday season. During one night of final festivities, Ward slipped away and gave a performance on his own account. His letter to Mark Twain from Austin, Nevada, written a day or two later, is most characteristic. Artemus Ward's letter to Mark Twain. Austin, January 1, '64. My dearest love, I arrived here yesterday a.m. at 2 o'clock. It is a wild, untamable place, full of lion-hearted boys. I speak tonight. See small bills. Why did you not go with me and save me that night? I mean the night I left you after that dinner party. I went and got drunker, beating, I may say, Alexander the Great in his most drinkinest days, and I blackened my face at the melodeon and made a gibbering, idiotic speech. God damn it, I suppose the Union will have it. But let it go. I shall always remember Virginia as a bright spot in my existence, as all others must, or rather cannot be, as it were. Love to Joe, Goodman, and Dan. I shall write soon a powerfully convincing note to my friends of the Mercury. Your notice, by the way, did much good here, as it doubtlessly will elsewhere. The miscreants of the Union will be batted in the snout if they ever dare pollute this rapidly rising city with their loathsome presence. Some of the finest intellects in the world have been blunted by liquor. Do not, sir, do not flatter yourself that you are the only chastely humorous writer on the Pacific slopes. Goodbye, old boy, and God bless you. The matter of which I spoke to you so earnestly shall be just as earnestly attended to, and again with very many warm regards for Joe and Dan, and regards to many of the good friends we met. I am faithfully, gratefully yours, Artemus Ward. The Union which Ward mentions was the rival Virginia. City paper, the Mercury, was the New York Sunday Mercury, to which he had urged Mark Twain to contribute. Ward wrote a second letter after a siege of illness at Salt Lake City. He was a frail creature, and 3 years later in London died of consumption. His genius and encouragement undoubtedly exerted an influence upon Mark Twain. Ward's second letter here follows. Artemus Ward to S. L. Clemens, Salt Lake City, January 21, '64. My dear Mark, I have been dangerously ill for the past 2 weeks here, of congestive fever. Very grave fears were for a time entertained of my recovery, but happily the malady is gone, though leaving me very, very weak. I hope to be able to resume my journey in a week or so. I think I shall speak in the theatre here, which is one of the finest establishments of the kind in America. The saints have been wonderfully kind to me. I could not have been better or more tenderly nursed at home. God bless them. I am still exceedingly weak, can't write any more. Love to Joe and Dan, and all the rest. Write me at St. Louis. Always yours, Artemus Ward. If one could only have Mark Twain's letters in reply to these, but they have vanished and are probably long since dust. A letter which he wrote to his mother assures us that he undertook to follow Ward's advice. He was not ready, however, for serious literary effort. The article sent to the Mercury was distinctly of the Comstock variety. It was accepted, but it apparently made no impression, and he did not follow it up. For one thing, he was just then too busy reporting the legislature at Carson City and responding to social demands. From having been a scarcely considered unit during the early days of his arrival in Carson, Mark Twain had attained a high degree of importance in the little Nevada capital. In the legislature he was a power. As correspondent for the Enterprise, he was feared and respected as well as admired. His humor, his satire, and his fearlessness were dreaded weapons. Also, he was of extraordinary popularity. Orion's wife, with her little daughter Jenny, had come out from the States. The governor of Nevada had no household in Carson City and was generally absent. Orion Clemens reigned in his stead, and indeed was usually addressed as Governor Clemens. His home became the social center of the capital, and his brilliant brother its chief ornament. From the roughest of miners of a year before, he had become once more almost a dandy in dress, and no occasion was complete without him. When the two houses of the legislature assembled in January 1864, a burlesque third house was organized and proposed to hold a session as a church benefit. After very brief consideration, it was decided to select Mark Twain to preside at this third house assembly under the title of governor, and a letter of invitation was addressed to him. His reply to it follows. To S. Pixley and G. A. Sears, Trustees, Carson City, January 23, 1864. Gentlemen, certainly. If the public can find anything in a grave state paper worth paying $1 for, I am willing that they should pay that amount, or any other. And although I am not a very dusty Christian myself, I take an absorbing interest in religious affairs, and would willingly inflict my annual message upon the church itself, if it might derive benefit thereby. You can charge what you please. I promise the public no amusement, but I do promise a reasonable amount of instruction. I am responsible to the third house only, and I hope to be permitted to make it exceedingly warm for that body, without caring whether the sympathies of the public and the church be enlisted in their favor and against myself or not. Respectfully, Mark Twain. There is a quality in this letter more suggestive of the later Mark Twain than anything that has preceded it. His third house address, unfortunately, has not been preserved, but those who heard it regarded it as a classic. It probably abounded in humor of the frontier sort, unsparing ridicule of the governor, the legislature, and individual citizens. It was all taken in good part, of course, and as a recognition of his success, he received a gold watch, with the case properly inscribed to the governor of the third house. This was really his first public appearance in a field in which he was destined to achieve very great fame. Volume 1, Chapter 5, Letters 1864-66, San Francisco and Hawaii. Life on the Comstock came to an end for Mark Twain in May 1864. It was the time of the Flour Sack Sanitary Fund, the story of which he has told in Roughing It. He does not, however, refer to the troubles which this special fund brought upon himself. Coming into the Enterprise office one night, after a gay day of fund celebration, Clemens wrote, for next day's paper, a paragraph intended to be merely playful, but which proved highly offending to certain ladies concerned with the flour sack enterprise. No files of the paper exist today, so we cannot judge of the quality of humor that stirred up trouble. The trouble, however, was genuine enough. Virginia's rival paper seized upon the chance to humiliate its enemy, and presently words were passed back and forth until nothing was left to write but a challenge. The story of this duel, which did not come off, has been quite fully told elsewhere, both by Mark Twain and the present writer. but the following letter, a revelation of his inner feelings in the matter of his offense, has never before been published. To Mrs. Cutler, in Carson City, Virginia, May 23, 1864. Mrs. W. K. Cutler, Madam, I address a lady in every sense of the term. Mrs. Clemens has informed me of everything that has occurred in Carson in connection with that unfortunate item of mine about the sanitary funds accruing from the ball. And from what I can understand, you are almost the only lady in your city who has understood the circumstances under which my fault was committed, or who has shown any disposition to be lenient with me. Had the note of the ladies been properly worded, I would have published an ample apology instantly, and possibly I might even have done so anyhow, had that note arrived at any other time, but it came at a moment when I was in the midst of what ought to have been a deadly quarrel with the publishers of the Union, and I could not come out and make public apologies to anyone at such a time. It is bad policy to do it even now, as challenges have already passed between myself and a proprietor of the Union, and the matter is still in abeyance. But I suppose I'd better say a word or two to show the ladies that I did not wilfully and maliciously do them wrong. But my chief object, Mrs. Cutler, in writing you this note, and you will pardon the liberty I have taken, was to thank you very kindly and sincerely for the consideration you have shown me in this matter, and for your continued friendship for Molly while others are disposed to withdraw theirs on account of a fault for which I alone am responsible. Very truly yours, Sam L. Clemens. The matter did not end with the failure of the duel. A very strict law had just been passed, making it a felony even to send or accept a challenge. Clemens, on the whole, rather tired of Virginia City and Carson, thought it a good time to go across the mountains to San Francisco. With Steve Gillis, a printer of whom he was very fond, an inveterate joker who had been more than half responsible for the proposed duel and was to have served as his second, he took the stage one morning and in due time was in the California metropolis at work on the morning call. Clemens had been several times in San Francisco and loved the place. We have no letter of that summer, the first being dated several months after his arrival. He was still working on the Call when it was written and contributing literary articles to the Californian, of which Bret Harte, unknown to fame, was editor. Harte had his office just above the rooms of the Call, and he and Clemens were good friends. San Francisco had a real literary group that, for a time at least, centered around the offices of the Golden Era. In a letter that follows, Clemens would seem to have scorned this publication, but he was a frequent contributor to it at one period. Joaquin Miller was of this band of literary pioneers, also Prentice Mulford, Charles Warren Stoddard, Fitzhugh Ludlow, and Orpheus C. Kerr. To Mrs. Jane Clemens and Mrs. Moffett, in St. Louis, September 25, 1864. My dear mother and sister, you can see by my picture that this superb climate agrees with me, and it ought, after living where I was never out of sight of snow peaks 24 hours during 3 years. Here we have neither snow nor cold weather. Fires are never lighted, and yet summer clothes are never worn. You wear spring clothing the year round. Steve Gillis, who has been my comrade for 2 years, and who came down here with me, is to be married, in a week or two, to a very pretty girl worth $130,000 in her own right, and then I shall be alone again, until they build a house, which they will do shortly. We have been here only 4 months, yet we have changed our lodgings 5 times, and our hotel twice. We are very comfortably fixed where we are now, and have no fault to find with the rooms or with the people. We are the only lodgers in a well-to-do private family, with one grown daughter and a piano in the parlor adjoining our room. But I need a change and must move again. I have taken rooms further down the street. I shall stay in this little quiet street because it is full of gardens and shrubbery, and there are none but dwelling houses in it. I am taking life easy now, and I mean to keep it up for a while. I don't work at night any more. I told the call folks to pay me $25 a week and let me work only in daylight. So I get up at 10 every morning and quit work at 5 or 6 in the afternoon. You ask if I work for greenbacks. Hardly. What do you suppose I could do with greenbacks here? I have engaged to write for the new literary paper, The Californian. Same pay I used to receive on the Golden Era, 1 article a week, $50 a month. I quit the Era long ago. It wasn't high-toned enough. The Californian circulates among the highest class of the community and is the best weekly literary paper in the United States, and I suppose I ought to know. I work as I always did, by fits and starts. I wrote 2 articles last night for the Californian, so that lets me out for 2 weeks. That would be about $75 in greenbacks, wouldn't it? Been down to San Jose, generally pronounced San Jose, emphasis on last syllable. Today 50 miles from here, by railroad. Town of 6,000 inhabitants, buried in flowers and shrubbery. The climate is finer than ours here, because it is not so close to the ocean, and is protected from the winds by the coast range. I had an invitation today to go down on an excursion to San Luis Obispo, and from thence to the City of Mexico, to be gone 6 or 8 weeks, or possibly longer, but I could not accept, on account of my contract to act as chief mourner or groomsman at Steve's wedding. I have triumphed. They refused me and other reporters some information at a branch of the coroner's office, Massey's undertaker establishment, a few weeks ago. I published the wickedest article on them I ever wrote in my life, and you can rest assured we got all the information we wanted after that. By the new census, San Francisco has a population of 130,000. They don't count the hordes of Chinamen. Yours affectionately, Sam. I send a picture for Annie and one for Aunt Ella. That is, if she will have it. Relations with the Call ceased before the end of the year, though not in the manner described in Roughing It. Mark Twain loved to make fiction of his mishaps and to show himself always in a bad light. As a matter of fact, he left the Call with great willingness and began immediately contributing a daily letter to the Enterprise, which brought him a satisfactory financial return. In the biographical sketch with which this volume opens, and more extendedly elsewhere, has been told the story of the trouble growing out of the Enterprise letters, and of Mark Twain's sojourn with James Gillis in the Tuolumne Hills. Also, how in the frowsy hotel at Angel's Camp he heard the frog anecdote that would become the cornerstone of his fame. There are no letters of this period, only some notebook entries. It is probable that he did not write home, believing no doubt that he had very little to say. For more than a year there is not a line that has survived, yet it had been an important year. The Jumping Frog story, published in New York, had been reprinted East and West, and laughed over in at least 1 million homes. Fame had not come to him, but it was on the way. Yet his outlook seemed not to have been a hopeful one. To Mrs. Jane Clemens and Mrs. Moffett, in St. Louis. San Francisco, January 20, 1866. My dear mother and sister, I do not know what to write. My life is so uneventful. I wish I was back there piloting up and down the river again. Verily, all is vanity and little worth, save piloting. To think that after writing many an article a man might be excused for thinking tolerably good, those New York people should single out a villainous backwoods sketch to compliment me on. Jim Smiley and his jumping frog, a squib which would never have been written but to please Artemus Ward, and then it reached New York too late to appear in his book. But no matter. His book was a wretchedly poor one, generally speaking, and it could be no credit to either of us to appear between its covers. This paragraph is from the New York correspondence of the San Francisco Alta. Clipping pasted in. Mark Twain's story in the Saturday Press of November 18th, called Jim Smiley and His Jumping Frog, has set all New York in a roar, and he may be said to have made his mark. I have been asked 50 times about it and its author, and the papers are copying it far and near. It is voted the best thing of the day. Cannot the Californian afford to keep Mark all to itself? It should not let him scintillate so widely without first being filtered through the California press. The New York publishing house, Carlton and Company, gave the sketch to the Saturday Press when they found it was too late for the book. Though I am generally placed at the head of my breed of scribblers in this part of the country, the place properly belongs to Bret Harte, I think, though he denies it along with the rest. He wants me to club a lot of old sketches together with a lot of his and publish a book. I wouldn't do it, only he agrees to take all the trouble. But I want to know whether we are going to make anything out of it first. However, he has written to a New York publisher, and if we are offered a bargain that will pay for a month's labor, we will go to work and prepare the volume for the press. Yours affectionately, Sam. Bret Harte and Clemens had by this time quit the Californian, expecting to contribute to Eastern periodicals. Clemens, however, was not yet through with coast journalism. There was much interest just at this time in the Sandwich Islands, and he was selected by the foremost Sacramento paper to spy out the islands and report aspects and conditions there. His letters home were still infrequent, but this was something worth writing. To Mrs. Jane Clemens and Mrs. Moffett in St. Louis, San Francisco, March 5th, 1866. My dear mother and sister, I start to do Sandwich Islands day after tomorrow. I suppose Annie is geographer enough by this time to find them on the map. In the steamer Ajax. We shall arrive there in about 12 days. My friends seem determined that I shall not lack acquaintances, for I only decided today to go, and they have already sent me letters of introduction to everybody down there worth knowing. I am to remain there a month and ransack the islands, the great cataracts and the volcanoes completely, and write 20 or 30 letters to the Sacramento Union, for which they pay me as much money as I would get if I stayed at home. If I come back here, I expect to start straight across the continent by way of the Columbia River, the Penn d'Oreille Lakes, through Montana and down the Missouri River, only 200 miles of land travel from San Francisco to New Orleans. Goodbye for the present. Yours, Sam. His home letters from the islands are numerous enough, everything there being so new and so delightful that he found joy in telling of it. Also, he was still young enough to air his triumphs a little, especially when he has dined with the Grand Chamberlain and is going to visit the King. The languorous life of the islands exactly suited Mark Twain. All his life he remembered them, always planning to return, some day, to stay there until he died. In one of his notebooks he wrote, "Went with Mr. Dam to his cool, vine-shaded home. No careworn or eager, anxious faces in this land of happy contentment. God, what a contrast with California and the Washoe." And again, "O islands there are on the face of the deep, where the leaves never fade and the skies never weep." The letters tell the story of his sojourn, which stretched itself into nearly 5 months. To Mrs. Jane Clemens and Mrs. Moffett, in St. Louis, Honolulu, Sandwich Islands, April 3, 1866. My dear mother and sister, I have been here 2 or 3 weeks, and like the beautiful tropical climate better and better. I have ridden on horseback all over this island, Oahu, in the meantime, and have visited all the ancient battlefields and other places of interest. I have got a lot of human bones which I took from one of these battlefields. I guess I will bring you some of them. I went with the American minister and took dinner this evening with the King's Grand Chamberlain, who is related to the royal family, and although darker than a mulatto, he has an excellent English education, and in manners is an accomplished gentleman. The dinner was as ceremonious as any I ever attended in California. 5 regular courses and 5 kinds of wine and 1 of brandy. He is to call for me in the morning with his carriage, and we will visit the King at the palace. Both are good masons. The King is a royal archmason. After dinner tonight, they called in the singing girls, and we had some beautiful music, sung in the native tongue. The steamer I came here in sails tomorrow, and as soon as she is gone, I shall sail for the other islands of the group, and visit the great volcano, the grand wonder of the world. Be gone 2 months. Yours, Sam. To Mrs. Jane Clemens and Mrs. Moffett, in St. Louis, Wailuku Sugar Plantation, Island of Maui, Hawaii, May 4, 1866. My dear mother and sister, 11 o'clock at night. This is the infernalest, darkest country when the moon don't shine. I stumbled and fell over my horse's lariat a minute ago and hurt my leg, so I must stay here tonight. I got the same leg hurt last week. I said I hadn't got hold of a spirited horse since I had been on the island, and one of the proprietors loaned me a big vicious colt. He was altogether too spirited. I went to tighten the cinch before mounting him, when he let out with his left leg and kicked me across a 10-acre lot. A native rubbed and doctored me so well that I was able to stand on my feet in half an hour. It was then half after 4, and I had an appointment to go 7 miles and get a girl and take her to a card party at 5. I have been clattering around among the plantations for 3 weeks now, and next week I am going to visit the extinct crater of Mount Haleakala, the largest in the world. It is 10 miles to the foot of the mountain. It rises 10,000 feet above the valley. The crater is 29 miles in circumference and 1,000 feet deep. Seen from the summit, the city of St. Louis would look like a picture in the bottom of it. As soon as I get back from Haleakala, pronounced Hale-eka-la, I will sail for Honolulu again and thence to the island of Hawaii, pronounced Hawaii, to see the greatest active volcano in the world, that of Kilauea, pronounced Kilauea, and from thence back to San Francisco, and then, doubtless, to the States. I have been on this trip 2 months, and it will probably be 2 more before I get back to California. Yours affectionately, Sam. He was having a glorious time, one of the most happy, carefree adventures of his career. No form of travel or undertaking could discountenance Mark Twain at 30. To Mrs. Orion Clemens, in Carson City, Honolulu, May 22, 1866. My dear sister, I have just got back from a sea voyage from the beautiful island of Maui. I have spent 5 weeks there, riding backwards and forwards among the sugar plantations, looking up the splendid scenery, and visiting the lofty crater of Haleakala. It has been a perfect jubilee to me in the way of pleasure. I have not written a single line, and have not once thought of business, or care, or human toil, or trouble, or sorrow, or weariness. Few such months come in a lifetime. I set sail again a week hence for the island of Hawaii, to see the great active volcano of Kilauea. I shall not get back here for 4 or 5 weeks, and shall not reach San Francisco before the latter part of July. So it is no use to wait for me to go home. Go on yourselves. If I were in the East now, I could stop the publication of a piratical book which has stolen some of my sketches. It is late. Goodbye, Molly. Your brother, Sam. To Mrs. Jane Clemens and Mrs. Moffett in St. Louis, Honolulu, Sandwich Islands, June 21, 1866. My dear mother and sister, I have just got back from a hard trip through the island of Hawaii, begun on the 26th of May and finished on the 18th of June, only 6 or 7 days at sea, all the balance horseback, and the hardest mountain road in the world. I stayed at the volcano about a week, and witnessed the greatest eruption that has occurred for years. I lived well there. They charge $4 a day for board, and $1 or $2 extra for guides and horses. I had a pretty good time. They didn't charge me anything. I have got back sick, went to bed as soon as I arrived here. Shall not be strong again for several days yet. I rushed too fast. I ought to have taken 5 or 6 weeks on that trip. A week hence I start for the island of Kauai, to be gone 3 weeks, and then I go back to California. The Crown Princess is dead, and thousands of natives cry and wail and dance for the dead around the King's palace all night and every night. They will keep it up for a month, and then she will be buried. Honorable Anson Burlingame, U.S. Minister to China, and General Van Valkenburg, Minister to Japan, with their families and suites, have just arrived here en route. They were going to do me the honor to call on me this morning, and that accounts for my being out of bed now. You know what condition my room is always in when you are not around, so I climbed out of bed and dressed and shaved pretty quick, and went up to the residence of the American minister and called on them. Mr. Burlingame told me a good deal about Honorable Jerry Clemens, and that Virginia Clemens who was wounded in a duel. He was in Congress years with both of them. Mr. B. sent for his son to introduce him, said he could tell that frog story of mine as well as anybody. I told him I was glad to hear it, for I never tried to tell it myself without making a botch of it. At his request, I have loaned Mr. Burlingame pretty much everything I ever wrote. I guess he will be an almighty wise man by the time he wades through that lot. If the new United States Minister to the Sandwich Islands, Honorable Edwin McCook, were only here now, so that I could get his views on this new condition of Sandwich Island politics, I would sail for California at once. But he will not arrive for 2 weeks yet, and so I am going to spend that interval on the island of Kauai. I stopped 3 days with Honorable Mr. Coney, Deputy Marshal of the Kingdom at Hilo, Hawaii, last week, and by a funny circumstance he knew everybody that I ever knew in Hannibal and Palmyra. We used to sit up all night talking, and then sleep all day. He lives like a prince. Confound that island. I had a streak of fat and a streak of lean all over it. Got lost several times and had to sleep in huts with the natives and lived like a dog. Of course, I couldn't speak 50 words of the language. Take it all together, though, it was a mighty hard trip. Yours affectionately, Sam. Burlingame and Van Valkenburg were on their way to their posts, and their coming to the islands just at this time proved a most important circumstance to Mark Twain. We shall come to this presently, in a summary of the newspaper letters written to the Union. June 27th, he wrote to his mother and sister a letter only a fragment of which survives, in which he tells of the arrival in Honolulu of the survivors of the ship Hornet, burned on the line, and of his securing the first news report of the lost vessel. Part of a letter to Mrs. Jane Clemens and Mrs. Moffett, in St. Louis. Honolulu, June 27, 1866. With a gill of water a day to each man. I got the whole story from the third mate and 2 of the sailors. If my account gets to the Sacramento Union first, it will be published first, all over the United States, France, England, Russia, and Germany. All over the world, I may say. You will see it. Mr. Burlingame went with me all the time, and helped me question the men, throwing away invitations to dinner with the princes and foreign dignitaries, and neglecting all sorts of things to accommodate me. You know how I appreciate that kind of thing, especially from such a man who is acknowledged to have no superior in the diplomatic circles of the world, and obtained from China concessions in favor of America which were refused to Sir Frederick Bruce and envoys of France and Russia until procured for them by Burlingame himself, which service was duly acknowledged by those dignitaries. He hunted me up as soon as he came here, and has done me 100 favors since, and says if I will come to China in the first trip of the great mail steamer next January and make his house in Peking my home, he will afford me facilities that few men can have there for seeing and learning. He will give me letters to the chiefs of the great mail steamship company, which will be of service to me in this matter. I expect to do all this, but I expect to go to the States first, and from China to the Paris World's Fair. Don't show this letter. Yours affectionately, Sam. P.S. The crown princess of this kingdom will be buried tomorrow with great ceremony. After that, I sail in 2 weeks for California. This concludes Mark Twain's personal letters from the islands. Of his descriptive news letters, there were about 20, and they were regarded by the readers of the Union as distinctly notable. Rereading those old letters today, it is not altogether easy to understand why. They were set in fine nonpareil type, for one thing, which present-day eyes simply refuse at any price, and the reward, by present-day standards, is not especially tempting. The letters began in the Union with the issue of April the 16th, 1866. The first, of date March 18th, tells of the writer's arrival at Honolulu. The humor in it is not always of a high order. It would hardly pass for humor today at all. That the same man who wrote the Hawaiian letters in 1866, he was then over 30 years old, could 2 years later have written that marvelous book, The Innocents Abroad, is a phenomenon in literary development. The Hawaiian letters, however, do show the transition stage between the rough elemental humor of the Comstock and the refined and subtle style which flowered in The Innocents Abroad. Certainly Mark Twain's genius was finding itself, and his association with the refined and cultured personality of Anson Burlingame undoubtedly aided in that discovery. Burlingame pointed out his faults to him, and directed him to a better way. No more than that was needed at such a time to bring about a transformation. The Sandwich Islands letters, however, must have been precisely adapted to their audience, a little more refined than the log Comstock, a little less subtle than the Atlantic public, and they added materially to his coast prestige. But let us consider a sample extract from the first Sandwich Islands letter. Our little band of passengers were as well and thoughtfully cared for by the friends they left weeping upon the wharf as ever were any similar body of pilgrims. The traveling outfit conferred upon me began with a naval uniform, continued with a case of wine, a small assortment of medicinal liquors and brandy, several boxes of cigars, a bunch of matches, a fine-tooth comb, and a cake of soap, and ended with a pair of socks. N.B. I gave the soap to Brown, who bit into it and then shook his head and said that as a general thing he liked to prospect curious foreign dishes and find out what they were made of, but he couldn't go that, and threw it overboard. It is nearly impossible to imagine humor in this extract, yet it is a fair sample of the entire letter. He improves in his next, at least in description, and gives us a picture of the crater. In this letter, also, he writes well and seriously in a prophetic strain of the great trade that is to be established between San Francisco and Hawaii, and argues for a line of steamers between the ports, in order that the islands might be populated by Americans, by which course European trade in that direction could be superseded. But the humor in this letter, such as it is, would scarcely provoke a smile today. As the letters continue, he still urges the fostering of the island trade by the United States, finds himself impressed by the work of the missionaries who have converted cannibals to Christians, and gives picturesque bits of the life and scenery. Hawaii was then dominated chiefly by French and English, though the American interests were by no means small. Extract from letter number 4. Captain Fitch said, "There's the king. That's him in the buggy. I know him as far as I can see him." I had never seen a king, and I naturally took out a notebook and put him down. Tall, slender, dark, full-bearded, green frock coat with lapels and collar bordered with gold band an inch wide, plug hat, broad gold band around it. Royal costume looks too much like livery. This man is not as fleshy as I thought he was. I had just got these notes when Captain Fitch discovered that he'd got hold of the wrong king, or rather, that he'd got hold of the king's driver, or carriage driver of one of the nobility. The king wasn't present at all. It was a great disappointment to me. I heard afterwards that the comfortable, easy-going King Kamehameha V had been sitting on a barrel on the wharf the day before fishing. But there was no consolation in that. That did not restore me my lost king. This is something of the flavor of the man we were to know later, the quaint, gentle resignation to disappointment, which is one of the finest touches in his humor. Further on he says, "I had not shaved since I left San Francisco. As soon as I got ashore, I hunted up a striped pole, and shortly found one. I always had a yearning to be a king. This may never be, I suppose, but at any rate, it will always be a satisfaction to me to know that if I am not a king, I am the next thing to it. I have been shaved by the king's barber." Honolulu was a place of cats. He saw cats of every shade and variety. He says, "I saw cats, tomcats, Marianne cats, bobtail cats, blind cats, one-eyed cats, wall-eyed cats, cross-eyed cats, gray cats, black cats, white cats, yellow cats, striped cats, spotted cats, tame cats, wild cats, singed cats, individual cats, groups of cats, platoons of cats, companies of cats, armies of cats, multitudes of cats, millions of cats, and all of them sleek, fat, and lazy, and sound asleep." Which illustrates another characteristic of the humor we were to know later, the humor of grotesque exaggeration, in which he was always strong. He found the islands during his periods of inaction conducive to indolence. "If I were not so fond of looking into the rich mass of green leaves," he says, "that swathe the stately tamarind right before my door, I would idle less and write more, I think." The Union made good use of his letters. Sometimes it printed them on the front page. Evidently they were popular from the beginning. The Union was a fine, handsome paper, beautiful in its minute typography and in its press work, more beautiful than most papers of today, with their machine-set type, their vulgar illustrations, and their chain-lightning presses. A few more extracts. The only cigars here are those trifling, insipid, tasteless, flavorless things they call Manilas, 10 for 25 cents, and it would take 1,000 of them to be worth half the money. After you have smoked about $35 worth of them in the forenoon, you feel nothing but a desperate yearning to go out somewhere and take a smoke. Captains and ministers form about half the population. The third fourth is composed of Kanakas and mercantile foreigners and their families. The final fourth is made up of high officers of the Hawaiian government, and there are just about enough cats to go round. In number 6, April the 2nd, he says, "An excursion to Diamond Head and the King's Coconut Grove was planned today at 4:30 p.m. The party to consist of half a dozen gentlemen and 3 ladies. They all started at the appointed hour, except myself. Somebody remarked that it was 20 minutes past 5 o'clock, and that woke me up. It was a fortunate circumstance that Captain Phillips was there with his turnout, as he calls his top buggy that Captain Cook brought here in 1778, and a horse that was here when Captain Cook came." This bit has something the savor of his subsequent work, but, as a rule, the humor compares poorly with that which was to come later. In number 7 he speaks of the natives singing American songs, not always to his comfort. "Marching Through Georgia" was one of their favorite airs. He says, "If it had been all the same to General Sherman, I wish he had gone around by the way of the Gulf of Mexico, instead of marching through Georgia." Letters numbers 8, 9, and 10 were not of special importance. In number 10 he gives some advice to San Francisco as to the treatment of whalers. He says, "If I were going to advise San Francisco as to the best strategy to employ in order to secure the whaling trade, I should say, cripple your facilities for pulling sea captains on any pretense that sailors can trump up, and show the whaler a little more consideration when he is in port." In number 11, May 24th, he tells of a trip to the Kalihi Valley and through historic points. At one place he looked from a precipice over which old Kamehameha I drove the army of Oahu 3/4 of a century before. The vegetation and glory of the tropics attracted him. In one open spot, a vine of a species unknown had taken possession of 2 tall dead stumps, and wound around and about them, and swung out from their tops, and twined their meeting tendrils together into a faultless arch. Man, with all his art, could not improve upon its symmetry. He saw Sam Brannan's palace, the bungalow, built by one Shillaber of San Francisco at a cost of from $30,000 to $40,000. In its day it had outshone its regal neighbor, the Palace of the King, but had fallen to decay after passing into Brannan's hands, and had become a picturesque Theban ruin by the time of Mark Twain's visit. In number 12, June 20th, written May 23rd, he tells of the Hawaiian legislature and of his trip to the island of Maui, where, as he says, he never spent so pleasant a month before, or bade any place goodbye so regretfully. In number 13 he continues the legislature and gives this picture of Minister Harris. "He is 6 feet high, bony, and rather slender. Long, ungainly arms, stands so straight he leans back a little, has small side whiskers, his head long up and down. He has no command of language or ideas. Oratory all show and pretense. A big washing and a small hangout. Weak, insipid, and a damn fool in general." In number 14, June 22nd, published July 16th, he tells of the death and burial ceremonies of the Princess Victoria K.K., and what was to be of more importance to him, of the arrival of Anson Burlingame, U.S. Minister to China, and General Van Valkenburg, U.S. Minister to Japan. They were to stay 10 or 14 days, he said, but an effort would be made to have them stay over July 4th. Speaking of Burlingame, Burlingame is a man who could be esteemed, respected, and popular anywhere, no matter whether he was among Christians or cannibals. Then, in the same letter, comes the great incident. A letter arrived here yesterday, giving a meager account of the arrival, on the island of Hawaii, of 19 poor starving wretches who had been buffeting a stormy sea in an open boat for 43 days. Their ship, the Hornet, from New York, with a quantity of kerosene on board, had taken fire and burned in latitude 2 degrees north and longitude 35 degrees west. When they had been entirely out of provisions for a day or two, and the cravings of hunger become insufferable, they yielded to the shipwrecked mariner's fearful and awful alternative, and solemnly drew lots to determine who of their number should die to furnish food for his comrades, and then the morning mists lifted, and they saw land. They are being cared for at Sanpahoe, not yet corroborated. The Hornet disaster was fully told in his letter of June 27th. The survivors were brought to Honolulu, and with the assistance of the Burlingame party, Clemens, laid up with saddle boils, was carried on a stretcher to the hospital, where, aided by Burlingame, he interviewed the shipwrecked men, securing material for the most important piece of serious writing he had thus far performed. Letter number 15 to the Union, of date June 25th, occupied the most of the first page in the issue of July 19. It was a detailed account of the sufferings of officers and crew, as given by the third officer and members of the crew. From letter number 15. In the postscript of a letter which I wrote 2 or 3 days ago, and sent by the ship Live Yankee, I gave you the substance of a letter received here from Hilo by Walker Allen and Company, informing them that a boat containing 15 men in a helpless and starving condition had drifted ashore at Sanpahoe, island of Hawaii, and that they had belonged to the clipper ship Hornet, Captain Mitchell, master, had been afloat since the burning of that vessel, about 100 miles north of the equator, on the 3rd of May, 43 days. The third mate and 10 of the seamen have arrived here, and are now in the hospital. Captain Mitchell, 1 seaman named Antonio Pasine, and 2 passengers, Samuel and Henry Ferguson of New York City, 18 and 28 years, are still at Hilo, but are expected here within the week. In the captain's modest epitome of the terrible romance, you detect the fine old hero through it. It reads like Grant. Here follows the whole terrible narrative, which has since been published in more substantial form, and has been recognized as literature. It occupied 3½ columns on the front page of the Union, and of course constituted a great beat for that paper, a fact which they appreciated to the extent of $100 the column upon the writer's return from the islands. In letters numbers 14 and 15 he gives further particulars of the month of mourning for the princess and funeral ceremonials. He refers to Burlingame, who was still in the islands. The remaining letters are unimportant. The Hawaiian episode in Mark Twain's life was one of those spots that seemed to him always filled with sunlight. From beginning to end, it had been a long, luminous dream. In the next letter, written on the homeward-bound ship, becalmed under a cloudless sky, we realize the fitting end of the experience. To Mrs. Jane Clemens and Mrs. Moffett, in St. Louis, on board ship Smyrniot, at sea, July 30, 1866. My dear mother and sister, I write now because I must go hard at work as soon as I get to San Francisco, and then I shall have no time for other things, though truth to say I have nothing now to write which will be calculated to interest you much. We left the Sandwich Islands 8 or 10 days, or 12 days ago, I don't know which. I have been so hard at work until today, at least part of each day, that the time has slipped away almost unnoticed. The first few days we came at a whooping gait, being in the latitude of the northeast trades, but we soon ran out of them. We used them as long as they lasted, hundreds of miles, and came dead straight north until exactly abreast of San Francisco, precisely straight west of the city, in a bee-line. But a long bee-line, as we were about 2,000 miles at sea. Consequently, we are not 100 yards nearer San Francisco than you are. And here we lie becalmed in a glassy sea. We do not move an inch. We throw banana and orange peel overboard, and it lies still on the water by the vessel's side. Sometimes the ocean is as dead level as the Mississippi River, and glitters glassily as if polished. But usually, of course, no matter how calm the weather is, we roll and surge over the grand ground swell. We amuse ourselves tying pieces of tin to the ship's log and sinking them to see how far we can distinguish them under water. 86 feet was the deepest we could see a small piece of tin, but a white plate would show about as far down as the steeple of Dr. Bullard's church would reach, I guess. The sea is very dark and blue here. Ever since we got becalmed, 5 days, I have been copying the diary of one of the young Fergusons, the 2 boys who starved and suffered with 13 others in an open boat at sea for 43 days, lately after their ship, the Hornet, was burned on the equator. Both these boys and Captain Mitchell are passengers with us. I am copying the diary to publish in Harper's Magazine, if I have time to fix it up properly when I get to San Francisco. I suppose, from present appearances, light winds and calms, that we shall be 2 or 3 weeks at sea yet, and I hope so. I am in no hurry to go to work. Sunday morning, August 6. This is rather slow. We still drift along, at intervals a spanking breeze, and then drift again, hardly move for half a day, but I enjoy it. We have such snowy moonlight and such gorgeous sunsets, and the ship is so easy. Even in a gale she rows very little, compared to other vessels, and in this calm we could dance on deck if we chose. You can walk a crack, so steady is she, very different from the Ajax. My trunk used to get loose in the stateroom and rip and tear around the place as if it had life in it, and I always had to take my clothes off in bed because I could not stand up and do it. There is a ship in sight, the first object we have seen since we left Honolulu. We are still 1,300 or 1,400 miles from land, and so anything like this that varies the vast solitude of the ocean makes all hands light-hearted and cheerful. We think the ship is the Comet, which left Honolulu several hours before we did. She is about 12 miles away, and so we cannot see her hull. But the sailors think it is the Comet because of some peculiarity about her foretop gallant sails. We have watched her all the forenoon. Afternoon, we had preaching on the quarterdeck by Reverend Mr. Rising of Virginia City, old friend of mine. Spread a flag on the booby hatch, which made a very good pulpit, and then ranged the chairs on either side against the bulwarks. Last Sunday we had the shadow of the mainsail, but today we were on the opposite tack, close hauled, and had the sun. I am leader of the choir on this ship, and a sorry lead it is. I hope they will have a better opinion of our music in heaven than I have down here. If they don't, a thunderbolt will come down and knock the vessel endways. The other ship is the Comet. She is right abreast 3 miles away, sailing on our course, both of us in a dead calm. With the glasses we can see what we take to be men and women on her decks. I am well acquainted with nearly all her passengers, and being so close seems right sociable. Monday 7, I had just gone to bed a little after midnight when the second mate came and roused up the captain and said the Comet has come round and is standing away on the other tack. I went up immediately, and so did all our passengers, without waiting to dress, men, women, and children. There was a perceptible breeze. Pretty soon the other ship swept down upon us with all her sails set, and made a fine show in the luminous starlight. She passed within 100 yards of us, so we could faintly see persons on our decks. We had 2 minutes' chat with each other through the medium of horse shouting, and then she bore away to windward. In the morning she was only a little black peg standing out of the glassy sea in the distant horizon, an almost invisible mark in the bright sky, dead calm. So the ships have stood all day long, have not moved 100 yards. August 8. The calm continues. Magnificent weather. The gentlemen have all turned boys. They play boyish games on the poop and quarter deck. For instance, they lay a knife on the fife rail of the mainmast, stand off 3 steps, shut one eye, walk up and strike at it with the forefinger. Seldom hit it. Also, they lay a knife on the deck and walk 7 or 8 steps with eyes closed shut and try to find it. They kneel, place elbows against knees, extend hands in front along the deck, place knife against end of fingers, then clasp hands behind back and bend forward and try to pick up the knife with their teeth and rise up from knees without rolling over or losing their balance. They tie a string to the shrouds, stand with back against it, walk 3 steps, eyes shut, turn around 3 times and go and put finger on the string. Only a military man can do it. If you want to know how perfectly ridiculous a grown man looks performing such absurdities in the presence of ladies, get one to try it. Afternoon. The calm is no more. There are 3 vessels in sight. It is so sociable to have them hovering about us on this broad waste of water. It is sunny and pleasant, but blowing hard. Every rag about the ship is spread to the breeze, and she is speeding over the sea like a bird. There's a large brig right astern of us, with all her canvas set and chasing us at her best. She came up fast while the winds were light, but now it is hard to tell whether she gains or not. We can see the people on the forecastle with the glass. The race is exciting. I am sorry to know that we shall soon have to quit the vessel and go ashore if she keeps up this speed. Friday, August 10. We have breezes and calms alternately. The brig is 2 miles to 3 astern, and just stays there. We sail directly east. This brings the brig, with all her canvas set, almost in the eye of the sun, when it sets beautiful. She looks sharply cut and black as a coal, against a background of fire, and in the midst of a sea of blood. San Francisco, August 20. We never saw the comet again till the 13th, in the morning, 3 miles away. At 3 o'clock that afternoon, 25 days out from Honolulu, both ships entered the Golden Gate of San Francisco side by side, and 300 yards apart. There was a gale blowing, and both vessels clapped on every stitch of canvas and swept up through the channel and past the fortresses at a magnificent gait. I have been up to Sacramento and squared accounts with the Union. They paid me a great deal more than they promised me. Yours affectionately, Sam.